Hi, my name is Brian Venton from Townsville, Australia, and welcome to another Words of Hope pastoral conversation. Today's chat is about revisionism, and I've taken it from Isaiah chapter 53, verse 3, which reads, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not." This past week I've been thinking a lot about history and how we respond to it as communities. Let me explain. Most of us can easily date back our forebears to around the 1700s. I know my kids can date back on their mother's side to Elizabeth Faulkner, the younger sister of John Pascoe Faulkner, who, with their convict parents, were aboard the ship Calcutta, which first attempted to settle Victoria in 1803. It was the same ship, you remember, that William Buckley, the convict, escaped from, and later in 1835 became instrumental in helping John Batman and Faulkner himself negotiate with Aboriginals to settle Melbourne town. This is all relatively recent history for us. Now let's go back a little further. From there, by another 1800 years, and Jesus Christ was born. Again, it's not really that long ago. Then, amazingly, we can go back another 800 years and we come to Isaiah, the Old Testament prophet, who wrote the text that we're looking at today. Isaiah foretold the coming of Jesus Christ in some amazing detail. But what I find interesting with this timeline, if we are honest, it is a relatively short period of time, around 3,000 years. And the history over this period is pretty well documented. Now enter revisionist history, which is defined as the theory or the practice of revising one's attitude to a previously accepted situation or point of view. Whilst history is always a record of events in some form, revisionist history is the attempt to reframe that history or emphasise a view of it that I suggest may well often have other agenda in mind. Probably the single biggest form of revisionism that has impacted our lives was the introduction of evolutionary theory by Charles Darwin in the mid-1800s. It reshaped long-held beliefs about God, creation, and the origin of things, and has dominated scientific theory ever since. It almost single-handedly neutered the impact of Christianity. Suddenly, conversation was less about 3,000 years of well-known, well-documented history and focused now on 200 million years of assumptions, hypotheticals and unknowns, designed more, I suggest, to discredit Christianity than encourage us to embrace it. Now, some may debate that point, but it is essentially what has happened. Now, this is where I want to jump back into our text. In verse 1 of this chapter, Isaiah asks a very poignant question. He says, "Who has believed what he has heard from me?" Why is this question a good question? Well, what we believe about history informs how we live in the present. Isaiah described events about Jesus Christ that were 800 years ahead of him. It is amazing what he describes. But there is a phrase here that I want to focus on that I think is extremely relevant to our conversation. That is the phrase, "we esteemed him not." Isaiah predicted the popular response to Jesus Christ. And whilst there was a messianic expectation within Judaism for a coming Redeemer, when Jesus was presented to Israel as that Redeemer, he was, as the text describes, despised and rejected. People turned their faces from him and esteemed him not. Now, Matthew Henry, in his commentary on Isaiah's question, put it this way: "Of the many that hear and the report of the gospel, there are few, in fact very few, that believe it. It is reported openly and publicly. It's not whispered in a corner, but proclaimed to all. And it is so faithful a saying and so worthy of all acceptation that one would think it should be universally received and believed, but it is quite otherwise. To this day, of the many that profess to believe this report, there are few that cordially embrace it and submit to the power of it." People may be willing to accept some aspect of the historicity of Christ, but most refuse to accept the purpose of his coming. People always seem to struggle, accept or believe that which does not fit the narrative of their worldview. We find it all too easy to engage in revisionist rhetoric. The low opinion that men had of Christ 2,000 years ago is no different today. Men still cancel him out and cancel others who believe in his name. They revile and turn their faces from him. They despise and blaspheme his name. They live as if he didn't exist. They devalue the merit of his work and elevate the merits of their own self-righteousness. In public office we esteem him not. Our chaplaincy programs have been divested. Our parliament seeks to abolish prayer in our procedures. A common oath replaces swearing over a Bible. We want God out of our constitutional preamble. The terms BC and AD have been removed from the world calendar and replaced with BCE and CE, all in the name of inclusivity and diversity. Sadly, it has even been shafted sideways from the church theology. He has been removed from Christmas celebrations and school pageantry. Decorations and carols are banned from some shopping centres, and Easter is little more than a public holiday replaced with Easter bunny and chocolate. Christian celebrations have been replaced by Halloween. Pride marches and corporate Marxism has no place for him in the inn. Pseudoscience, environmental alarmism, and the gods of leisure and self-interest are the modern day replacements, and somehow people think this is all great stuff. These are the tragic themes of our short 3,000-year history, from Isaiah to Jesus and from Jesus to now. All of us too easily revise Christ out of our lives and have esteemed him not. Now, the more I think about these distortions of reality makes me grieve deeply. Maybe you grieve too. Perhaps you'd like to join me in this prayer. O God, enlarge my mind to embrace Jesus in his totality. Guard me from shutting him out of my life. I acknowledge that my heart is sometimes, like Spurgeon says, as hard as a granite rock, and at other times as cold as the snow that covers it. Soften my heart towards you and teach me to esteem you above all else. Amen. Now, I trust you have found this chat helpful today, and I suggest that nothing will raise the sceptre of hope in your life than giving Christ the preeminence he deserves, both in history and in our hearts. God bless. Thanks for watching, and see you next week. Bye.